Hey there, folks. It's Javier Blog 208 here, coming to you live from my living room of the place I live at. It is now 9:16 p.m. here in Boston, Massachusetts. Happy New Year, just around the corner. I wanted to start this off by doing my annual tradition of reflecting on the year on video. I understand, I want to just come out to just give my sympathies. I understand that for a lot of people, this has been a very, very tough year. For me personally, it was a very tough December. So this month was tough, but the year was actually pretty good. It was a pretty good year for me, to be honest with you. Personally, me. Um, so starting in January, I we January kind of started off. I went to New York to spend time with my parents. And we went to this, me, my parents, and my brother went to this game place in New York where there was bowling, there was laser tag, there was all kinds of fun stuff in January. And January was before the pandemic, by the way. It was really, really cool. And I took a boat tour out to see the Statue of Liberty ferry in New York. This was before all the masks and all the lockdowns and everything, that so I took a boat tour by myself to see the Statue of Liberty, and it was just awesome. I got to see it from the sea. Um, so it was a very nice boat, by the way, and we saw New York from like the sea and everything. So yeah. So later in January, I had a trip to Hawaii planned, and obviously I was still working at my job in Boston, at JP Licks, the ice cream place. Good job, by the way. I still work there currently. My boss was telling me about this virus thing. My boss is a very, 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 very Christian man, very conspiracy in a lot of ways. Kind of follows up, a lot of the end time stuff. He was telling me about this virus that was coming out of China. Um, And I remember just hearing him telling me, giving me all these warnings about this coronavirus that was coming out of China. And I wasn't really, I was kind of dismissing it because, I was just thinking, like many of us probably at that time, that this was all China's problem. That this is just, it's a China thing, it's not going to go further than China. The thing is just in China, the coronavirus. You know what I was thinking? I'm never going to go to China. I'm never going to go to China. That's what was on my mind. So this virus was starting out in China, and I wasn't even giving it a second thought because I'm just like, there were no cases in Massachusetts then, and there were no cases there. I don't even think, may have had like one or two cases in the U.S. It was nothing major. Um, I know that they talked about this cruise ship that got infected, but I wasn't like looking at this like this was a big deal. I mean, this is all as far as I knew. This just was a China thing. So come January 28th, I took my trip to Hawaii that I planned the previous year, and that's probably the best thing, the most interesting thing I did all year. I'm never ever 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 gonna forget it. Never gonna forget it. Um, January 28th, I boarded my plane at Logan International Airport in Boston. Flew a cross country flight to Las Vegas, talked to the guy on the plane next to me. We were talking about all kinds of topics. He was actually a Christian man. We were talking about, politics, the coronavirus, a lot of different things, about God, a lot of different things. It was a very interesting conversation. So I flew my flight from Boston to Las Vegas. And Las Vegas, I changed planes and I went over to Oakland, California from Las Vegas. And then I changed planes again. I had a lengthy layover in Oakland, and I changed planes again, and I got to Hawaii the next morning. Um, and it was just amazing, getting into Honolulu. Something I'm just never, ever, ever, ever gonna forget. Never gonna forget. I got videos, on my channel about it, and I stayed at a hostel in Honolulu. Oh my God, I met people from all over the world. It was just amazing. I met people from like Europe. I even met a friend on Facebook. I can't pronounce your name. Sueval. I can't pronounce your name, but I forgot what country you're from. But you're somewhere from Europe or something. But from Germany. From it was just so awesome to be out there. I saw the oceans, the beaches. I went to the Pearl Harbor Memorial in Honolulu. I went to the big mall in Hawaii, and I just explored and adventured out there, and it was so awesome. It was just probably the best thing I did. And then 3 days later, I got on another plane to the Big Island of Hawaii. It was a very short flight. I flew out to Hilo on February 1st, and that was just amazing going out to Hilo. I went out to Hilo. I had Hawaiian pizza for the first time with pineapples, and it was just a town, a very nice town by a volcano, and I got to kind of see what the life was like there. The culture was there. I saw people picking coconuts from coconut trees, and just all the fresh fruit that they had there. It was just a beautiful thing, and the whole place was just by the ocean. Hilo had a different temperature than Honolulu. Like if Honolulu was 80, Hilo was 70. But again, this is kind of year round. Hilo was like in the middle of a big tropical rainforest. So the Airbnb I stayed at in Hilo was just every night I just fell asleep to the sounds of the rainforest, that kind of surrounded Hilo, Hawaii. Um, and I just like heard birds chirping and all that. It was just beautiful. I got to fall asleep to that every night in Hawaii and Hilo. And one of the days I was there, I took a tour up the volcano, and we went up to the explore. Went up to the top of Mount Kilauea, the volcano in Hawaii, which actually was an active volcano. Um, I saw it was just amazing. I saw the crater. I saw everything. It was just so amazing to see the volcano and the crater. And then I went to see, where all the dry lava was. And then the guy was giving me a tour about it. The guy was giving us a tour of it. It was just in a vehicle. It was a vehicle tour. I didn't do the helicopter tour because that's expensive. But I did the vehicle tour, and it was just so amazing. Seeing all the dry lava, and you touch the dry lava, it's still warm. From all the eruptions that have happened out in out in Hilo. So it was just so awesome. Then he was giving me personally because I talked to the guy a lot. He's giving me a personalized tour. Because he saw me, taking videos and all. He was asking if I had a blog, and I told him I have a YouTube channel, and I do that. So it was just, oh my gosh, I will never ever forget it. And I explored the lava rocks. I saw the steam vents. I saw the top of the volcano, and it was just, and I saw tons of nature and wildlife, and oh my God, I'm never gonna forget it. And all of it's just surrounded by the ocean. All of it's surrounded by the ocean. So I spent 3 days in Honolulu, 3 days in Hilo, and I got to know the culture there and all that. And the restaurants, the Hawaiian pizza, which I loved it, by the way. The Hawaiian pizza was amazing. So 3 days in Honolulu, 3 days in Hilo, and I went back to Honolulu for a little bit, for about a day. Um, and it was just a little. It was just I just got to just soak it up as much as possible. Total, I spent about a week in Hawaii total. That's between Hilo and Honolulu. It was the best trip of my life. I'm telling you guys the truth, and it happened this year in 2020. It was the best trip of my life. Probably, in competition with Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, where my late grandmother was from, and still owned a house there before she passed this year. Um, so I ended up, after my week in Hawaii, I ended up flying back. I flew back into Utah, and I went to spend some time. Went to visit with some people there, who I used to get to know. Hannah Perry, Bill, people there who are just like family to me and just mean a lot to me. And then I went over to Arizona, and I spent time with my family out there. And one of my biggest regrets from Arizona was that I didn't visit with my abuela Faith, my grandma Faith, who passed this year, and that would have been a great opportunity to visit her. I went back to Boston, and then as soon as I got back to Boston, all hell was breaking loose. The pandemic was starting, and and they were cutting people at my work, and all these lockdowns were starting, and it was just crazy. So this is February. They were shutting down the restaurants, and they were shutting down everything, and it was just, and they were removing all the seating areas in public places. It was just massive chaos, massive chaos. So actually, the lockdown started in March. So I think there was a little bit of time I got to. Oh, I forgot to tell you guys. On my way back to Boston, I had a layover in Missouri, and I went to visit the river. I had a lengthy layover in Missouri, and I went to visit the river where I got baptized in. It was just a beautiful visit, so it was just an amazing time. So I got back to Boston, and about a month later, all hell was breaking loose. All the restaurants were closing, and everything was happening, and the lockdown was starting, and just everything was just kind of breaking loose. And everybody was wondering what was going on in the world. You know, what was going on? What's going on? What's going on? There's a terrible virus that's now come to America, and people are dying, people are getting sick, people are dying. States are locking down, restaurants are locking down. We all went through it. All of us went through it. The flights started to become ultra cheap, because nobody was traveling, because everyone was afraid to travel. um, Understandably so at that time. And it was just, everybody was just telling me, this is just something really bad is happening. Something really bad is happening. And I was terrified. I was terrified. I was terrified then. I thought that this thing was coming. This is a deadly virus. It's much more deadly than the flu. And God's judgment is coming to the earth, and we all got to be prepared because we're nearing the return of Christ and all that. I was just like in panic mode in all cases, and I was afraid, to even go out, without wearing a mask. And this is before they started to mandate masks and require social distancing and all that. This is before all that started. This is before I was wearing a mask by myself. Nobody told me to wear a mask. I was wearing a mask by myself because I was just terrified. I was terrified. And I remember, thinking that like one night I just felt like I was having a nightmare. And this is like February, March-ish, somewhere. And I'm like, there's a horrible smell coming from the basement. The virus is here. Bum, bum, bum. The virus has arrived. God, 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 God. So yeah, it was just terrible. It was terrible. And then they started to cut hours at work, and not only cut hours, they cut me and some other people off completely. I ended up spending a couple weeks fighting for my job, which I eventually got back. And I'm grateful to God that I did, because my boss was ready to just cut me off completely. Um, so my old boss, he got laid off because of the pandemic, and my new boss decided to cut me out and some other people out. But I fought back and I got my job back. So praise the Lord. At first, they started to say you don't have to wear masks at the job, blah blah blah. And then May 16 came. Then May 6th came, and Massachusetts mandated masks for everybody. So, everybody had to wear a mask, and so the story goes. We all had to wear masks. Things were getting crazy, and then we started to get this new vocabulary: social distancing, wear your mask, social distance, and all this new vocabulary started to pop up. Coronavirus, COVID-19. Woohoo! Crazy days, crazy days. So March, April, actually I went out to Virginia in April, to see my parents, actually. Well, I went out to Virginia in April to see family, and I also voted in the primary, the Democratic primary for president. First time I ever voted in a Democratic primary, by the way. I went for Tulsi Gabbard, and she was the one who I supported. I was very, very proud to support her. My favorite candidate of them all. And not only that, she was from Hawaii, and I was just in Hawaii, and there was a lot that I liked about her. She seemed like a more sensible and more conservative Democrat, I guess. And I just liked her a lot. I really did. And my buddy over here, Cody, God bless you, buddy. You liked her too, and I just kind of was. I enjoyed finding common ground with you there. You were. It was very nice to find common ground with you about Tulsi Gabbard because she was my favorite by far out of all the Democratic candidates, and obviously Trump. She was my favorite by far. Um, I went to vote. She didn't win. She didn't even get close. April, this is before everything got bad and really, but everything was on lockdown. I still went out to DC. I went out by bus and I'm trying to remember. So traditionally working. I went back to DC in June to spend time with friends. In June, Virginia was opened up, Rhode Island was opened up, Massachusetts was still locked down. So it was like by the time June came, I was like, I was sick of it, It was like, this is still going on. The lockdown is still going on. We're all still shut down in Massachusetts, but other states are opening up. Look at this. Rhode Island opened up. Malls are open in Rhode Island. Restaurants are open in Rhode Island. Look at this, what's it called again? Virginia's back open. So it was just nice to get away from the lockdown for a little bit. And, but I also wanted to share something. I had a perspective on the lockdown. My own perspective was before, this is like as this was all starting, let's just fast forward back to March. This needs to happen. We need to have a lockdown because I was strongly supportive of it. People need to know people need to be cut off from their regular lives. That was what I believe. People need to be cut off from their regular lives, from going back to restaurants and taking life for granted and treating homeless people like crap and treating poor people like garbage. People need to be cut off from that. God is angry. That's why this is happening. And all this stuff. Of all the greed in the nation, all the greed in America. This is just a big cutoff from that. That was well deserved. And that was the stance I took for the first couple of months. But by the time June came around, I personally was sick of it. So I went to Rhode Island and I spent time there. Not spent time there. I mean, I spent a day in Rhode Island. And it was just awesome because everything was open. Massachusetts was totally locked down. I went to Virginia. Everything was open. Massachusetts was totally locked down. So the story goes. So it was June. I spent time with friends in DC and Virginia, and met up with my friend Nico and Janelle, and it was just an awesome time. Went back to Boston. I did not travel again for the next couple months. So I went back to Boston in June. So I didn't travel again in July. I didn't travel again in August. Outside of Massachusetts and Rhode Island, meaning, because those were the only two states I was kind of back and forth from, because I'm able to catch, the train goes out to Rhode Island from here. It's very, very easy to get there. It's so easy. I love Rhode Island, by the way. I love going out to Providence, and it's just it's been kind of my personal getaway throughout the summer, honestly. But no, I stayed in Massachusetts between June, July, August, and after June, so July, August, and September, and up till late October, I stayed in Massachusetts. So 3.5 months I didn't travel at all outside of Massachusetts. Within Massachusetts is a different story. I went to Rockport a couple times. I went to the Wachusett Mountain with my brother. I went out to Provincetown. I went to Nantucket, and all these are areas in Massachusetts. So I had a wonderful summer in Massachusetts. It was I actually took the time to enjoy. Between like June, July, and August and September, I took the time to enjoy the state, which I took for granted. And I got instead of leaving the state to any state besides Rhode Island, I actually got to know the state a lot. I went out to Worcester, Mass. I went out to Nantucket, Mass. I went out to Provincetown, Mass, Rockport, Mass, spent a lot of time in Salem, Mass, went out to Plymouth, Mass. I went out to Worcester. Well, Worcester was boring, but Worcester's kind of a rundown town, and the lockdowns made it all worse. It's sad. So August came around, and August came around, and very what happened? Oh yeah, I remember. There was the whole Black Lives Matter protest because George Floyd was killed, and obviously I'm very, very supportive. I believe in the cause. I believe in the cause. I believe that these people have not been heard, and I mentioned that before in my videos. Um, and it was just yeah, all this stuff. I remember getting stranded out in Boston. Legacy, Legacy, good friend of mine who I worked with at JP Licks. Sorry about what happened, by the way. I'm sorry to laugh, but I'm sorry about what happened. Oh yeah, I've had great conversations with you throughout the year, Legacy. You're a good person. I really, really appreciated getting to know you. You really helped me open my mind a lot, and I'm kind of glad that we were both open minded and we talked a lot. You're a very interesting person to get to know. So, oh yeah, I got stranded out in Boston during the riots and the George Floyd protest riots and all that. I wasn't really involved, but I was just I was just kind of out there seeing what was happening. Curiosity almost killed the cat, but didn't. Yeah, good times. Uh so June, July, August, September. I stayed in Massachusetts. I stayed within the state of Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and I took the time to get to know Massachusetts. I went to so many different parts of Massachusetts. It was just an amazing summer. I caught the ferry out to Nantucket. Caught the ferry out to Provincetown. It was just Massachusetts is paradise during the summer. It's paradise during the summer. I love it during the summer. Not during the winter. The rest of the year, Massachusetts kind of sucks. I'm being honest with you, but during the summer, Massachusetts is just beautiful, beautiful. I love it. And yeah, so June, July, August, September, and most of October, I stayed, within the border of Massachusetts, and occasionally I went to Rhode Island. Oh, good old Rhode Island. You know, I got to know, Providence is a very nice town, and I really like it. Um, so October, I decided to take my first trip. My first trip since all this since June. I went out to. Well, I started off by going out to Phoenix. Just personal matters out there. I wanted to kind of just to get to know the pre-election culture out there, what was going on, and all that. And I met up with a friend of mine in Phoenix. Shout out to Miss Laura Hag, wonderful person. It's been a great time knowing you, by the way, this year via social media and having lunch at First Watch in Phoenix. Again, my biggest regret from Phoenix is I didn't see my grandmother. Um, of course, I guess October was more understandable than February because no, because October everybody is still afraid, and all that. And then I flew out to Oklahoma City. Shout out to Austin Turner. By the way, this is my shirt from Oklahoma. I got there. I just happen to be wearing it now. I flew out to Oklahoma City. I visited the site of the Oklahoma City bombing, and that completes my, memorial tour. That completes my memorial tour of the country. I visited the 9/11 Memorial in New York last year in October. I visited the Pearl Harbor Memorial in Hawaii, and I visited the Oklahoma City bombing memorial. Timothy McVeigh bombed the federal building and killed people, including children. It was very sad, very sad. And then I went to visit another memorial in Oklahoma, and this one, Austin Turner, you know about this. Um, and it was the Plaza Towers Elementary School in Moore, Oklahoma, where 7 children were killed in a tornado. I think it's beautiful that you're studying this, Austin, and I really, really admire you for that. Um, God bless you, buddy. You mean a lot to me. You really do. Um, Anyway, so the Plaza Tower Elementary School in Moore, Oklahoma. I remember I had lunch at I had dinner at a Mexican place in Oklahoma. It was wonderful. A Mexican place, real, it's run by real Mexicans and all that. Really wonderful place, and wonderful food too. Wonderful food. The guy there was from Jalisco, and I told him my grandmother's from there. My grandmother who passed away. Grandma Faith, I wish you were there alive to watch this right now. I know you were seeing this from heaven, and I miss you so much. I really miss you so much. So I remember the nice lady in Oklahoma. She gave me a ride to the Plaza Towers Elementary School, and we talked a little bit, and and then I got a ride back to the Greyhound station with the Uber driver. And then I went off and I got to know, people from Oklahoma at the Greyhound station. And then I went off to Arkansas. And I spent a day in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I got really the nice, deep Southern vibe, deep Southern. The people there were so friendly in Arkansas. They had accents there. Some of the people there were very conservative too. However, the town I was in surprisingly had a lot of Biden signs. Over my Uber driver in Fayetteville was talking to me about Nancy Pelosi and all these corruption of the Democrats and all that. So I just listened along. It's the South. I gotta love it for what it is, and I love it for what it is. It's the South. Um, Anyway, so it was just I had a good time in Arkansas. I went to this grilled cheese sandwich restaurant, and it was just very, very wonderful Southern food there. And the Southern waitress there, she was about my age. Appeared to be flirting with me. She kept looking at me in the eyes, and it was just she had a Southern accent and all that. It was just a nice trip. I explored the history of Fayetteville, Arkansas, and I went out to not only the restaurant, met some of the people out there, and I made a donation to local farmers at the grocery store, and that was just a wonderful thing. The grocery store was supporting local Arkansas farmers, and it was just very nice to be out there in Arkansas. I enjoyed every minute of it, every minute of it. So I stayed in Arkansas for over 24 hours, over in Fayetteville for over 24 hours. My host, by the way, was this wonderful lady. She wrote a really, really, really nice review of me on Airbnb. One of the best reviews I've ever gotten, actually. Oh, God. And everybody was just so wonderful down south. I loved Arkansas. I love Arkansas. I fell in love with Arkansas in particular. It's just the people there. I went out to there was this garage sale that was happening at night. There was these Southern guys selling t-shirts. I didn't buy anything, but I just looked at it for a lot, and just the culture out there and the vibe out there it was wonderful, wonderful. I loved it. Went back to my Airbnb, and it was just very nice. The host was nice and everything. And then I went out to after Arkansas. Next day, I went out to Shreveport, Louisiana. No, actually, I connected transferred at the Texas Arkansas border, and then I went out to Shreveport, Louisiana. I doubt you guys made it this far, but cheers if you guys did. I'm telling you guys my whole story. Went out to Shreveport, Louisiana, and my host there was the friendliest person ever. She reminds me of Kathy Turner, by the way. Hashtag Kathy Turner. Um, and she was just she gave me a ride to downtown Shreveport. I got to see all the history out there in Louisiana, and went inside a casino in Shreveport. I didn't gamble, but I just kind of looked inside because I had an ID and everything, and I'm of age, so and then my Uber driver from there went over to a mall, and then my Uber, saw some people, met some people who live out there. My Uber driver from the mall told me his whole story about how he was struggling, down in Texas, and how he has family in Texas and all that. And I promised him I'd give him an extra big tip, and I did, and I kept that promise. And it was just really, really, really nice. So after that, I went home. I went back to the Airbnb in Shreveport. I cooked my food, and then I went on my next journey out to Jackson, Mississippi. In Jackson, Mississippi, the bus over there, it was a crazy bus ride. It was a crazy, so forget Corona because the whole bus was packed, okay? The bus, first of all, I kind of screwed up. I forgot that I changed my bus ticket, so my bus ticket was invalid, so I had to buy a whole new one. It was just really, it was really, really sad. I had to do that. Um, on the way over there, the bus got a flat tire. And then on the bus got a flat tire, it was just for 3 hours we were stuck in the middle of the road between Louisiana and Mississippi, and over in Mississippi, and then I remember all the deep Southerners, all the rednecks on the bus. There were a lot of rednecks on the bus. They were just making all these. It was hilarious. And then I asked some guy where we are. We're still in Louisiana. We're still in Louisiana. Deep Southern accent, it was just. I've never seen anything like it, but I love these people for who they are. It's just all these, redneck, deep Southern, whites, and a lot of blacks too. Is just. I've never seen anything like it. I remember at the Greyhound bus station in Shreveport. As I was getting on the bus to Mississippi, we were looking at the news, and I was asking this deeply redneck guy, what's your opinion on the election? He's like, I think it's bullshit. And then he started saying something about, Biden and all that. I love these people for who they are, okay? It's beautiful, it's just it's a different culture. It's a different culture. I wouldn't change them if I could. It's it's their culture. Just don't bring it up to the north. Don't bring it up to the Northeast. It's your culture. But it's just funny. I enjoyed it. Got to Mississippi. Talked to some more rednecks. And then I left the bus in Mississippi. And one of the first things I noticed as I was walking in downtown Jackson is lines and lines and lines extending for blocks and blocks of black people who are getting ready to vote, many of them not social distancing, many of them not wearing masks, but just lines of black people. They extended up for like three blocks, and they were getting ready and they were voting. They were getting ready to vote. And yeah, it was something. And it was just something I've never seen before, just lines and lines and lines of people wanting to vote. I explored Jackson. I saw downtown Mississippi, downtown Jackson, Mississippi. I saw a Confederate monument for the first time in my life. Down there, just a big old Confederate monument, in a place, full of black people. It's just very. Something I've never seen before, and it was just something. It's the South. We're in Jackson, Mississippi. Jackson, Mississippi. And I went out. Then I went out to see, explore the history of Jackson. Saw a lot of history. I met some of the community out there, and and then they gave me food too. They gave me food. It was really really nice of them. Some of the blacks in Jackson, they gave me food because they were having a community event. Even though they had some people looking at me like they have no idea who I am. I'm just kind of this stranger who popped into town in the middle of Jackson, Mississippi. And it was just definitely something. And then then I went out to the Museum of Mississippi History. And we're in. So I spent time in the Museum of Mississippi History, and It was something, you know. It was something. Um, no, in the Museum of Mississippi History. I'm sorry, it's history. I'm getting sidetracked. This is a very long video. I'm actually going to be breaking this video up into segments so you guys, because I doubt anybody's going to watch this whole thing. I really don't. So I'm just going to kind of be clear on where the segments are in this video. And so the Museum of Mississippi History, you know, had to wear a mask. Obviously, was cool with it. And I explored. You know, I learned so much about the history of Mississippi, about, you know, its history, and then I went to the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, and I learned so much there. Learned about Emmett Till, learned about the civil rights movement, the civil rights. I met a civil rights activist who I interviewed on video. You know, and you can check my video, my interview on YouTube. And I loved it. It was just something that, and I learned so much there about the history of Mississippi. And then after that, I went out from the Mississippi History. I went out to the post office, and I had to mail some stuff back home to Boston in a box because I didn't want to carry too much stuff around, and just trying to lighten my load a little bit. So I went out and mailed some stuff back to Boston, and it was just something. And then I went out to see the. And I also, you know, while I was there, you know, I went to see the community in Mississippi. You know, I spent time with some of the blacks out there, the community, and got to know them and got to talk to them, you know, about their community events and their average day life in Jackson, Mississippi. And it was just so interesting to learn from them. It was amazing to learn from them. It was just Mississippi was just an incredible edge. I know between Arkansas, you know, northern Louisiana, Mississippi. It was just actually Oklahoma, Arkansas, northern Louisiana. I'd say Mississippi was just such an incredible learning experience. It was just amazing. So after Jackson, Mississippi, you know, I went out to Baton Rouge. I had an hour layover in Baton Rouge, and spent some time, you know, took whatever I could get out of it, you know, got some pictures, you know, saw some sights, you know, and then went out to New Orleans. In New Orleans, you know, I did it all. I'm just going to rush through New Orleans because New Orleans was less, for me personally, New Orleans was less educational. Like, for example, Arkansas, Oklahoma, northern Louisiana, and especially Mississippi, were a massive educational experience. But New Orleans was more of a vacation-y, you know. I went to the big mall there. I spent time with hashtag Nation Nathan Allen there. Went out to dinner. You know, I spent some time. I stayed in an Airbnb. No, at a hostel. You know, I there was a lot of Smoothie Kings there. That was really nice. You know, I saw the Jackson Square, the harbor, the French Corridor. It was less educational. It was more vacation-y. So I spent 3 days in New Orleans, and then I went back to DC. You know, I had a layover in Orlando. Took what I could get out of that, and I went back to DC to vote in the election in Virginia. By the way, back home in Virginia. So I voted there and cast my vote, you know, and, you know, I spent some time out in Virginia and DC. I interviewed some people and I just had a awesome time, you know, and a very interesting time, you know. And a couple days after the election, you know, I had some funny experiences in DC. By the way, it's hard to get into, especially, you know, spending time at a community home in DC where, you know, all kinds of people lived. Interesting people, by the way, you know. God. Where do I start with that? Spent some time at a community home in DC, you know, where I met people. I met a guy that walked there from Louisiana. I literally walked there from Louisiana. He said he was on a quote unquote pilgrimage. Actually, I watched part of the election, you know, at a community home in DC. It was just so interesting. Almost everybody there was for Biden. And when it looked like Trump was gonna win, one lady almost looked like she fainted. When it looked, I don't want to laugh at that, but just it's just some of the reactions that night. I met a guy who was an anarchist, a proud anarchist, as far left as you can get. I met a guy who was saying that he voted for Trump because I don't want to laugh at this, but he said he voted for Trump because he knew people in DC who were. This is crazy. I'm sorry, folks. Don't turn this off. This is crazy. He knew people in DC who were quote unquote his friends who were complaining that the government won't give them money for sex change operations. For sex change operations. I don't even understand. I'm at loss of words. By the way, I interviewed that guy. That interview is also on YouTube. He was the funniest guy I met there, but no, honestly. God, I remember, who else there? Who else? Oh, there was this Irish guy who got mad because he thought I took. It was just craziness. Anyway, folks, so that's October, November. Biden won the election. Trump complains. He thinks the election was stolen. He starts this whole crusade saying that he thinks the election was stolen. I'm back in Boston right now. By then, I'm back in Boston. Following up with this insanity, he thinks the election was stolen and all that. And, I just try to. It's just hard to speak, when you see what's going on, in our political climate. It's toxic, it's disease ridden and toxic. And I just almost want to stay out of it. Honestly, whatever happens is, at the end of the day, whatever happens is God's will. I voted for Biden. It's in God's hands now. Okay. Anyway, so, and then came December. I was back in work. I was working normally. And then came December, where I got the horrible news that my grandmother passed away. And it was painful for me. Painful for me. Very, very painful for me. It pained me, the very fact that I haven't called her since January, that I haven't actually spoken to her on the phone since February. My poor grandmother, it's like I took her for granted and I forgot about her, and it just breaks my heart. Breaks my heart. It's not the one. It's not the one. I have a grandmother out here. My mom's mom. She's still alive. It was my dad's mother, who was so special to me. Who was nothing but good to me in her life. Took me out to Mexico when I was younger, and took me out to Denver several times. She introduced me to all of my family in Colorado, and sometimes I got into it with her, but I loved her to death. I loved her to death. So we went out to Phoenix for the funeral. And my dad, nothing is sadder than seeing your dad running out of a funeral home crying. And I was just glad I was there for him. And it broke my heart, that this happened. And then there was this, her house in Sun City was just full of memories of people who passed. I'm just remembering, all the people I knew, My Uncle Chris, who I got to know in 2013, who died in 2014. My my great grandma Juanita, who passed away in March 2015. Her best friend Maxine, who was a big part of my life, who was family to me, who was family. We were her family. And she passed away in November of that year. She lived long enough to grieve with us about the loss of my great grandmother in 2015. She was 95 years old, going on 96. And before she passed, she would have been 96. And I, 3 months after my great grandmother passed, I went out to see Maxine. There was my Aunt Barbara, who was really, really close to all. I was living out in Utah by myself. I loved her so much, and I was so close to her too. She's the one person I don't have any regrets with because I was very close to her. I went to Denver several times to visit her. Several times. I went twice while I was in Utah, once while I was in Boston, and she was my great grandmother's last sister. And I was close to her. I talked to her on the phone. She prayed, and one night, I was breaking down on the phone in September of 2018. I was like telling her that I don't have a job, and then she promised me she'd pray for me to have a job. When she went to bed that night. 2 days later, I got a call from JP Licks that I got hired. A few days after that, she passed away. But I'm never gonna forget her. Never gonna forget her. So, and then there was my grandfather, my dad's father, who passed away last year, and now my dad's mother, who passed away this year. So it was a very sad way to end the year, you know. And now I'm just concerned as this year comes to an end. I'm concerned about my, my my friendship with a certain person who I care about so much. I'm not gonna say your name, but you know who you are. And it grieves me if I end up losing you. I don't want to lose you. I care about you so much. Um, and and Shane Russell, I'm not talking about you. You may think I'm talking about you, but I'm not. Also, you mean a lot to me too, Shane. You do. You mean a lot to me too. You mean the world to me. I care about so much. I care about you so much too, but you're not the person I'm talking about here right now. You're not the person at reference right now. Anyway, so this is where the year ended up. It's now 10:03 p.m. This video's been going on for 47 minutes. So, New Year's Eve party is in 2 hours. I've been on a roller coaster this year, with my buddy Shane Russell. It's kind of personal between me and us, but my buddy Shane Russell, I've been on a roller coaster with you. I've been on a roll. I'm going on. It's been a heck of a year for me, emotionally and relationship wise. And it's just very tough. So we'll see what 2021 brings. I hope you guys have a wonderful new year, and God bless you. Take care. This is Javier Blog 208, tuning out.